Okay. This is March 22nd, 2012, and we are interviewing Donald Wright, the Harold Burson Professor of Public Relations at Boston University. This is for the Page Center Oral History Project. Thanks for taking time out of your day to do this, Don. We appreciate it.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm a huge fan of the Arthur W. Page Society and of the Page Center, so it's my pleasure. It's an honor to be asked to do this.
Great. As editor of Public Relations Journal, PR Journal, you've had a good perspective on current research in the field. What is the direction of research in public relations today, and what issues can we expect to see explored in the future?
Well, the very nature of Public Relations Journal, the fact that it's an online refereed, blind reviewed journal, so essentially certainly the nation's and probably the world's first public relations scholarly journal, only published online. The turnaround time for an article to be accepted and then published within Public Relations Journal is very short. I mean, we've had situations where an article has been good enough and timely enough that maybe within a month after receiving it, it's been published. And when you look at the other scholarly journals in public relations, it can take 4, it can take 5. I know of one situation with a piece of research that I was the author of. It took 6 years to get published. So public relations is changing more dramatically than situations where we can wait 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And authors know this, and so particularly things like social media studies, things that are related to the new technologies or the emerging media. Since we started in 2007, we've had a lot of social or new or emerging media articles. But there's other things too that I think are shaping the landscape of the scholarly literature, not just in Public Relations Journal, but in the rest of the studies that are out there. And clearly the ROI question, I mean, everybody is looking for the return on investment situation. What's the magic formula? And of course, if whoever finds it is going to be, sitting on an island, very rich, because but that's one of the big wannabes. We're seeing some very interesting things relative to measurement. That for far too many years, much of the measurement in public relations related to advertising value equivalencies, AVEs. I've often said that it's really unfortunate that AVEs doesn't come with an additional letter, so then we could call it a 4-letter word, and we could sort of say we will not use that word. But the whole concept of advertising value equivalencies as measurement for public relations is beyond ludicrous, and the problem is that the other methods are in some cases emerging, and in most cases much more expensive to implement than the simplicity of the AVEs. So we have that situation. Furthering along the measurement line, we have the question of standards. What are the appropriate standards of measurement? How should these be implemented, and so forth and so on. And then the other area that I see is ethics. I can remember back in the 25, 30 years ago when I was publishing some of the first articles that dealt with social responsibilities and ethics in public relations. A lot of people were critical of those studies, not necessarily critical of the methodological approach or anything that I was writing, but the fact that somebody would assume that there would be ethics within public relations or any aspect of corporate communication. Of course, that we're in a different world today. Transparency is crucial. We saw, a decade ago with the situations involving organizations such as Enron and Global Crossing and Tyco and Health South and a number of Arthur Andersen and other organizations like that. So ethics, I would add to that list as well.
You've done quite a bit of research yourself in the area of social media. Was Marshall McLuhan right? Is the medium the message?
I've never thought Marshall McLuhan was right, although I'm an admirer of what he did to basically get information about communication and communication research introduced to a wider audience. But I don't think that the medium ever has become the message. I think what's crucial is what you put in the medium that becomes the message, regardless of whether it was the television situations that McLuhan wrote about, or the social media situations that we have today, or anything in between.
Most of the ethical issues in communication focus on the responsibilities of the sender of the message. But you've said that the receivers and users of the messages have ethical responsibilities too. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, if you turn back the clock to the time before we had what we now call new or emerging media, that the senders really controlled the message, and that there was very little opportunity for a receiver to provide feedback. I mean, the receiver could do things like possibly write a letter to the editor, or when talk radio came along, call in to a station and talk about the topic. But the topic was always decided by the sender, not by the receiver. And if you take a look at the traditional models of communication, the who says what to whom through which channel with what effect, that famous Laswell paradigm, or any of the writings of the earliest communication scholars, Wilbur Schramm, the work of Paul Lazarsfeld, and a number of other political science and sociologists of the 1930s and 1940s, who kind of became the first scholars of what we call today communication theory. If you look at any of that work, I mean, the sender directed those messages. All of the models focused on the sender, and the only exceptions for that were, as some of the research progressed, and particularly the Erie County, Ohio voting studies and so forth and so on in the 1940s. That we started to look at what the academic term is opinion leaders, the practitioner term would be influentials, and we started to look at how opinion leaders or influentials were passing messages along to receivers, and looking at the two-step flow communication or multi-step flow communication theories. I mean, now we're in a situation where the receiver can, if he or she wishes to do so, can basically decide, what to look for. 30 years ago, if you were a sports fan, you would pick up the sports page of your newspaper, and the sports editors would determine what was, what you would read. So there would be many more stories on that sports page about men playing football or men playing basketball than there would be about high school girls involved in gymnastics. Now, and if you were a parent of a high school girl who is on the gymnastics team, you would probably have to be satisfied with only a small paragraph here or there. Today, you can go to through the web, and we all know today I think the sports example is a great one, because we all know of situations where a young woman is on a college gymnastics team or the swimming team or what have you, and the parent really doesn't care how that institution's football team did, but they really do care about how the women's swimming team did, and they can go to websites and not only get results, but in many cases, particularly with what are called the so-called minor sports, particularly with sports such as soccer and so forth and so on, you can sometimes get play-by-play television of them. I mean, it's not going to be done by the same crew that's going to be broadcasting the Rose Bowl or Monday Night Football, but you can get that information, and so I think that this has played a a very significant role in elevating the significance of the receiver in the communication models.
You know, parenthetically, it sure has made life harder for sports information directors
Absolutely.
at small colleges.
Absolutely,
whose
yeah.
parents want to read the results of the softball game
Exactly.
5 minutes after it's over.
Of course, exactly, yeah, really, yeah.
Turning to public relations more generally than the educational aspect of it, what do you see as the greatest challenges facing public relations executives today, and how can these be met?
I think there's several things that we should talk about in this area, and I'd like to do it with the in the spirit of the idea that challenges also can be opportunities, because I think that the fact that public relations now is much more strategic communication. It's much more. I mean, the chief public relations officer at the most successful companies has the same status in the organization as the attorney has when you're dealing with questions that relate to the law, and the communication officer deals with those situations in what I like to call the arena of public opinion. I don't think there is a court of public opinion, because I believe that court, as in a legal court, both sides of the story get to be told. But in public opinion, often if you get your side of the story out there first, that will be the side of the story that is believed. So that I think that given that perspective, I think that we could list some things here relative to the challenges, and clearly the pressures of the 24/7 news environment. You used to be able to, if you had some bad news, you could announce it on Friday afternoon and it would sort of go away. It doesn't happen anymore. You can't ask a question of this nature and not have an answer that deals with something about the economy, because the economy is impacted so much by organizations today, and not just the housing issues, but we have wage and salary issues. We have people out of work. We also have Americans who are now taking on jobs that, there are some very major companies in the United States who have gone to the workforce and said, look, we can keep these jobs in the U.S., but they're only going to pay $15 an hour, that we can no longer pay you $35. And at first, unions and workers and everybody says, well, we don't want those jobs. Well, now we do, because $15 an hour isn't much, but it's better than minimum wage or nothing, and the company can very well go elsewhere in the world and have those products made. So you have the economy as an issue. I think you have globalization. I think as public relations has moved away from sort of the publicity press agency function and moved much more into working with companies, counseling them what to do and how to do it, then I think a challenge for public relations is a reality that the tenure of CEOs is much shorter than it used to be. In some cases, it's only 2 to 3 years. I think the average is somewhere in the 3 to 4 year range for Fortune 200 companies. And that if you are the public relations officer and you are working very closely with the CEO, when there's a CEO change, then the new CEO might wish to bring in another another chief public relations officer. So I think that those are issues as well.